Hello, everyone. I'm Annie Gibbins, and you're listening to Memoirs of Successful Women, the podcast where you get to hear candid conversations with fascinating women from around the globe who share aspects of their business and life journey, how they measure their success, and what they have learnt along the way. Well, hello and welcome, everybody. This is Annie from Memoirs of Successful Women, and today I have got a very exciting guest. Her name is McKay, and she is a global negotiation strategist. She's also an international speaker and author and has her own podcast show. This lady is definitely one who makes the impossible possible. She's all about getting results, and she's even negotiated at an executive level in 53 countries around the world, with nearly half of them on the Fortune 500. So welcome to the program, Christine.
Thank you, Annie. I am so excited to be here. This is really awesome. So I'm really, really excited. So thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here.
It's a pleasure. I'm super excited to have you on my program because I've certainly not had a chief negotiator. And let's face it, most people that's the one area that they can pull back on. They can freeze and go, I'm really excited. I want to do business. I've almost got the job, the role, the project, the opportunity. And now comes the time of negotiation. Yes, am I right? I
Yes.
wouldn't be the only person. So
Yes.
hear about yourself. How did you become a chief negotiator, and what does that even mean?
So I started doing negotiation after I graduated from college. And I was working for what's now Verizon. And so in the telephone industry in the early 1990s, when there was a lot of privatization activity all over the world. And I started working in international finance and started my career really in Southeast Asia, primarily Indonesia, the Philippines, Singapore, spent a lot of time also in Hong Kong and Japan and South Korea as well. And I was negotiating with ministers of finance and ministers of telecommunication as they were buying and selling parts of their state-owned assets. And then once I was done working in Southeast Asia, I started working in Europe where they were selling their state-owned assets and privatizing so that they could enter into the common currency, which didn't exist at that time, which tells you how long ago it was. I still have all those currencies. Um, and so I had one deal in particular that was my company bidding with British Telecom and Teledenmark to buy a stake in the Belgian telephone company Belgacom. And I was responsible for getting every single company, their executive team, their bankers, their advisors to all agree to a single price that we would put forward in our bid documents to Belgacom. And I did that. And I loved it. I loved the complexity of it. I loved the psychology. I loved the analytics of it. I loved the contracts. And I mean, there was just pretty much nothing that I did not like about doing that deal. And so it started me once I went to business school. And after I graduated from business school, I started continuing to work in mergers and acquisitions and divestiture environments, but doing a lot more work in procurement and in sales. And I just started seeing I was working with all these Fortune 500s, but at the same time, I got to see the smaller companies and what the impact was of M&A and divestitures on a small organization when a large company is selling a part of itself or all of itself. It has a direct impact on small businesses who are its customers or its suppliers. And I didn't really like how I saw that unfolding for smaller businesses. So I started Venn negotiation out of a passion for helping small businesses level the playing field in their negotiation, especially when they're doing what I affectionately call David and Goliath negotiations, when they're negotiating with the big guys.
Yeah, it must be wow. For a start, what a career journey. And just, suddenly finding yourself in a spot that you go, you know what? I love this. It's
Hmm.
almost like I can feel this, the tone of your voice. It's like when you're in a stage and you go, this is almost sport. It's fun. It's exciting. This is just the area that I love. Whereas someone else, as I said in the intro, would just be like, oh my gosh, I feel so uncomfortable here. So, one, to actually just fall into your niche.
Hmm.
Two, to then have the opportunity as you grew in your career to see, yeah, what the big guys, what Goliath does and how they operate. And to be honest, it must be for the average small business who comes up against that. Do they even have a chance if they don't have a chief negotiator? How do they operate? Is it seriously lopsided from your perspective all the time?
Well, it depends on who they're negotiating with. So that's always going to be the case. So some companies are much easier to do business with than others. And just like people are easier to do business with than others as well. But it depends. It depends on kind of who you're negotiating with, as well as who you are as a negotiator. If you're somebody who is kind of who hates conflict and is really conflict avoidant and just like runs the other direction. I was speaking with a gentleman not long ago, and he literally took his fists, closed his body off, and said, "How can you talk about this topic? It's so combative." And he clearly does not like negotiating, and he's clearly had a lot of very bad experiences. And so for me, negotiation is a relationship. And all of us like being in relationships of one kind, shape, or form. And that's all negotiation is. It's setting the boundaries and the rules of engagement in our relationships. And we do it all the time in our personal lives. And so when we are in business, what we end up doing is we get into a relationship. Sometimes we start doing business and we start to negotiate with somebody who then kind of gets to be a bully. And we just kind of move forward with that. Don't do business with bullies. There are plenty of nice people in the world. You don't need to do business with bullies. So that gentleman that I was telling you about, he's clearly done business with a lot of bullies.
Yeah.
And you never have to do that. No matter what anyone says to me, as soon as someone says, well, I had to do that deal. I'm like, no, there are alternatives. You can find other revenue sources. If you know your numbers and you're prepared, you have alternatives.
Mm.
So you can find different revenue sources. You can find different suppliers, and so really just making sure that you are doing business with the people who you want to have a relationship with, because that's all it is. It's just people. So
I love the way you make it so simple, but also that is so true, isn't it? The amount of people in any area of their life that they go, I didn't have a choice. I had to act in this way. There was no other option. Whereas that's exactly right. Whatever area of business we're in, and even personally, you always have a choice. It's your
yes,
choice to actually progress in that area. No one else is making you. And that's right. It's a very big world. And, if you're going to stand for certain things, then you need to go into different ponds, as I'll call it, to actually
yes,
find those like minded people.
yes.
So, that man, let's use him as an example then. The one who's actually just, swallowing up in his own little shell, going, oh my goodness, the whole concept of what he thinks is combative sort of relationship building, whereas you're going, no, we're all friends here, we need to have a pleasant conversation. How do you work on his behalf? What are the main things that you actually say, okay, I'm professionally advising you now and working for you? What would you do for him?
So usually what we do is we work on specific contract relationships. So right now in the United States, I have a lot of clients who are renegotiating their commercial leases. So I have a lot of small retailers, doctor's office, restaurants, who, because of COVID, are needing to renegotiate those leases. And so I'm working with their landlords on their behalf. So
Mhm.
that's one way that we work with our clients, is we actually go in and negotiate on their behalf. And we do not replace an attorney, because we are not lawyers. We are absolutely business people, and we take a very business approach to negotiation and to contracting as well.
Mhm.
But we go in and we do the business negotiation. We'll partner with with our client's attorney if there's a legal document that needs to be reviewed, and we'll get advice on that. And then, so that's one way that we work with our clients, is just negotiating on their behalf. And the other way is that we work and we train them. We have different types of programs that we have rolled out and are continuing to roll out. We're about to roll out a new one that I'm super excited about. That's really about helping people become more comfortable with negotiation. So it's kind of like Toastmasters for negotiation, where people are able to practice. So there's a learning aspect, there's a practice aspect, and then there's a feedback aspect.
Mm.
Because what happens a lot of times, and in my experience, what I see is part of the reason why people are so uncomfortable negotiating. And by the way, the people who say that they're really excellent negotiators often are not very good negotiators. They just enjoy doing it. And I'll be honest, I'm really amazing at negotiating on behalf of my clients. I'm not so good negotiating on behalf of myself. Nobody is excellent at negotiating 100% of the time. And if they tell you they are, they're full of they're full of it. Because negotiation is inherently emotional, because
Yes.
we are emotional beings, and as soon as we want something from somebody else, our emotions are engaged,
Yes.
so we can't shut that emotion off. So we what we do when we work with our clients on a training perspective and an educational perspective is we actually help them try different things on. We practice different negotiation styles so that they can start to get more comfortable leaning into different styles in different situations, instead of having a style that they just use because it's the one that they've been using since they were 7 years old. Because we've all been negotiating. When I speak at events, I always ask people, who in here is a child? Who is somebody's child?
Mm.
Because if you're somebody's child, you used to be an amazing negotiator. You just may have forgotten about it. Because
I,
I'm telling you, those 7-year-olds to 13-year-olds, they know how to
Oh my
negotiate.
goodness. You know what? They know how to wear you down. They know how to play you against each other. Oh my gosh. Like as a mum of five, seriously, they are highly, highly skilled in this department. So that's an interesting point that you've raised then too of in one way you say negotiation is just a relationship, right? And then on the other hand, we have personal relationships and then we do business, and many of us go, oh, business is ruthless, it's it's hard, and whereas you're saying as an expert negotiator, you need to build relationships which are personal, but you not need to not take the negotiation personally. Is that
Mhm.
an
Yeah.
accurate assessment?
Yes. Because the thing is that you know, one of the reasons why people get uncomfortable over time negotiating is because they start hearing no a lot. And and I always say that the hardest part of any negotiation is the negotiation we have between our ears.
Yes.
And once we start hearing no, we start negotiating against ourselves before we've even engaged a counterpart.
Hmm.
So we'll say to ourselves, well, I really want this, but then we'll talk ourselves out of it because we'll say, oh, that's asking too much. I just don't think that that's doable.
Hmm.
And it's only those moments when we are like really confident in knowing what we want and understanding why we want it, that we become more fearless in terms of asking for more of what we want. But it's just because we hear no so often, we think we've heard it more than we've heard yes. And the reality is in our lives, we've heard yeses a lot more than we've heard nos. It's just the nos are more memorable in many cases for us. And so it impedes our ability to ask for more in our business relationships. But
Hmm.
every relationship, I mean, I've been married to my amazing husband for 27 years. And I always say that the negotiation that we had, the deal we had when we got married is not entirely the same that then as it is now, because we've changed, we've grown, we're different people than we were then because
Yeah.
we're a lot older and our kids are gone, and I mean all these things. And so in business though, we often enter into business relationships and we expect the relationship to stay the same, not taking into account that if the relationship between your business partners and your suppliers and your customers is going to be a really prosperous one, you're both going to grow.
Mm.
And the deal that you enter into today is not going to be the same deal that's going to work for you in 10 years. But I've walked into deals where I've seen contracts that are 20 years old that have hardly been touched. And it's like this is not a good way of doing business because you haven't grown with each other. You haven't given yourself permission to grow and to change and to allow that relationship to move back and forth as it needs to, because that's the natural way that relationships work in the first place.
I love that parallel as a life coach and a business coach, but particularly from the life coaching perspective, that's exactly the same principle. That you're actually looking at how does whatever I do today influence my future, not the past. The past is gone. So it may have worked in the past, it might have been right or wrong, but it's definitely changed as we're all evolving and the situation changes. And anyone in business, it's the agile, it's the adapter that
Yes.
actually thrives. It's not the smartest or the one who had the most prestige or brand or whatever in the past. None of that actually matters in the present, yeah, and definitely moving forward. So I can understand that situation of, but we've always done business with them and now suddenly they're changing or they're not happy with the old terms. It's usually because that other company realizes then they need to adapt and it's not going to work for them for the future, as
Hmm.
opposed to, that's right, it doesn't invalidate the relationship you had before. That's when you
Right.
take it too personally. I think, in my
Yes.
world, a lot of people then get offended. Well, I thought we were friends and I thought we'd, established a really good, strong relationship. And the answer to that, I feel, is yes, we have and we are. However, the situation is changing. The
Yes.
situation has changed. And look at the world at the moment. People will be negotiating everywhere, right?
Oh,
Um,
it's crazy. I mean, and I talk a lot about I talk a lot about renegotiation, and then the big one of the big buzz phrases right now is customer for a lifetime. You want to have a customer for a lifetime. So I'll be in front of a group of people and I'll ask the question, who believes in a customer for a lifetime? And people will raise their hand and they're just like all in. And then I'll ask, who in here has a policy in that they talk about in their sales process of renegotiation? So you're selling to me and you tell me the deal we enter into right now, we're going to evaluate it in a year. And if it doesn't work, then we're going to renegotiate. Is that part of your sales process? And in my 30 years of doing negotiation, I have had one company in the sales process say to me, if this doesn't work, let's evaluate it in a year. And if this doesn't work, then we'll just renegotiate the deal so that we make sure that it works for both of us. And I was like, that is
that's
how
that's the
that
problem.
that's like, I was like, oh my gosh, I love you. I mean, it was like, because, because when you know that that's an opportunity, because at the end of the day, somebody usually walks away from the proverbial negotiation table with more than the other person.
Hmm,
There's otherwise we just divide it down the middle and call it good, but
yeah,
that's not what negotiation is about. So somebody usually walks away with a little bit more, right? Over time, you may discover that you walked away with a lot less than you thought you did, and your counterpart walked away with a lot more. And something may change in your business that isn't working for you, and it's okay then to go back to your counterpart and say, "Look, I need to renegotiate this."
hmm,
And I talk a lot about contracts because there's formal and informal contracts, and informal, it's on a handshake and it's your word, or it's on the back of a napkin, or you shot it over in an email, right? Or left it in a voicemail, or you have a formal contract that an attorney or a barrister has been involved in writing. And the thing is that contracts are risk mitigation tools, and there are 5 different types of risk that are related to contracts. There's legal risk, but that's the only one that's legal. So there are 5 of them. 80% of the risk in a contract is business risk. It's cash flow related, it's profitability related, it's operations related, and it's strategy related.
yeah.
So 5 types of risks, 4 of them are business, only one is legal. So at least in the United States, um, you know, we have a lot. One of the biggest challenges that small businesses have is that they'll get a contract and they'll just hand it to an attorney who doesn't understand their business fully. And so then all this 80% of the risk factor is embedded in that contract, and it isn't necessarily going to play out right in the bit from the business perspective. But it's those same 5 risk factors that drive the need to renegotiate a relationship. Usually, what happens is one of those 5 elements is out of sync. And when you know what's driving the change in your relationship, it makes it a lot easier to then go to a counterpart to say, I need to renegotiate because this deal is hurting my profitability in this way and by this much. And so
Mm.
we need to readjust, right? So when you think about those 5 different risk factors and you put them, you think about them in terms of when you might need to renegotiate, those have become the drivers. So
Fascinating. Fascinating. You mentioned before, in a little tone, I'm a businesswoman, not a lawyer. I often think of, and one of my sons is a lawyer, so and we often mention that he has a degree in arguing. Slash
that's
possible
hilarious.
negotiation, right? And he was definitely that 7 to 13-year-old who had a query for everything, and push, push, push. So it's very interesting. What is the difference then between legal negotiators and business negotiators? How would you see the difference there?
So lawyers are invested, their whole role is to make sure that what you are doing is above board with the law, that you are protected. So they are risk adverse as a general rule. They're very risk adverse, and they'll talk about different things. Like there's a language called limitation of liability in contracts, and lawyers get all crazy about it, and they like, okay, it's got, they and that is just a clause that oftentimes attorneys just kind of dig their heels in and go after. But at the end of the day, every negotiation I've been in with every single company, the attorney looks at me at the end of the day, looks at their business owner within their organization and says, it's a business risk. You have to decide how much risk you're willing to assume.
Mm.
Now, so the, from a business perspective, I'm not as risk adverse.
Yeah.
Like I have a contract that I just had close, and I didn't like it I didn't like the contract. I didn't like the way it was written. It contradicted some of the things that they had agreed to us, that they'd agreed to do in the negotiation, and et cetera, et cetera. But we had worn these guys down pretty long and pretty hard. And so we had to make a tactical decision. Is there value in continuing to hammer after, the agreement, or do we just believe that, or do we just want to have faith that if we needed to renegotiate at some point in the future, that we'll figure out how to make that happen?
Mm.
And and a lawyer will not necessarily kind of be okay with that, and will not necessarily be 100% comfortable with that. But from just a practical perspective, right? So a business negotiator tends to, and, and I mean, I know some lawyers who are also very pragmatic. So, I'm making this distinction, and it is not applicable across all legal attorneys, and it is not applicable across all business negotiators. But like I sit and write a business case for when I'm doing a contract. I make a business case and analysis. I do numbers. I flow things from revenue down to the profit line. So, and that's not something that most attorneys do. It's not what they're educated to do.
Mm.
They're trained to know the law. I do not know the law. They know the law. It's why we're perfect partners. I
Mm.
know business. I
Mm.
know how big companies buy and sell products and services. That's what I know, but I do not know the law. So I need them to make sure that my clients and me are protected and all that. But at the same time, we will end up making business decisions based on how much risk the business is willing and able to assume.
Mm. When you've been unsuccessful in any negotiation, what do you learn from that? Is it something that you could have done, or is it just the reality that sometimes you just don't always get what you want?
Oh, I think you don't always get what you want. So I mean, I have a client right now that I'm not happy with. I'm not happy with how the negotiation unfolded at all. It's been very, very frustrating. My client is a $1.25 million, small retailer. She's, it's her business. She works in it. She's got like 8 employees, and her landlord is a $12 billion market cap company. And, for small businesses, I often tell people, don't do business with companies that are massively bigger than you.
Mm,
It will always be hard to create leverage because and you have to get creative for figuring out how you're going to do it. But in this case, you had a $12 billion company, and my client's a million, 1.25 million, right? It's a pretty big discrepancy.
yeah.
And she wants to open a second store. And I said, just don't do it with these guys. Find a smaller, because I mean, smaller landlords,
Yeah.
they're much more amenable to being creative with terms and finding new creative solutions and working with their tenants, whereas these big guys who've got, Wall Street, have got investors to satisfy and all this, they have a lot, they have limits in what they can do.
Mm,
And so that is really frustrating.
mm.
So I mean, at the end of the day, I got her like two years and 9 months of deferred rent at 0% interest, but I just wanted the rent to go away. That it didn't go away. But it's like a 0% loan for almost 3 years.
Yeah.
And which is a good deal. It's just not what I had been hoping for, especially given how large the landlord is. And so in terms of, so I looked at that, I go back and I do a postmortem on every deal I do to figure out, okay, did I have the wrong communication style? Did I communicate, right? Did I make the right adjustments with respect to my communication style? Did the process work? Did we manage the process effectively? Because that's a big thing, is managing the negotiation process.
Mm.
What did it, were there things that I could have done? And I'll talk to other people who are negotiating those same things and say, I mean, in looking at this deal, what do you think I could have done differently? And so I definitely do postmortems. This was really the first contract, though, I'll be honest, that I did not like the outcome on. This is the
Mm.
first contract in my career that I have not been satisfied with the outcome.
Oh
And
my
it,
goodness.
it's been very frustrating. It's been very for when I'm in terms of my negotiation up for clients,
Yeah.
in terms, I mean, there's plenty of negotiations on behalf of myself that I've not been happy necessarily with the outcome. But for my clients, this is the first one that I feel that I didn't do what I had wanted to do for my client.
Mm.
And that's been very frustrating. Been very frustrating.
I could just
I'm not
imagine
used, this is new territory for me.
you're
I don't like
definitely
it.
out of your comfort zone. It's like, nope, this does not happen to me, but it can even happen to Christine.
Yeah, I mean, but the thing is that, and that landlord has two of my clients are with that landlord. So,
Mm.
it's just, they're just sometimes, and you do all the things, like I'm big into research. So that is the number one thing that I wish that more people did more of in negotiation, was be better prepared.
Mm.
And so, in that case, I get on the phone with the landlord and I'm like, okay, look, I've looked at all your properties across the geography, spanning 400 miles within this geography. I've looked at every one of your properties. I've looked at what the mix is of your tenants. I've looked at what your vacancy is, by property, what your vacancy rates are by tenant type. I mean, I did all this math and, I just did all this research. And so when I disclosed that I had done all this homework, that was when we got to the really long, because originally they were saying they were only going to give us 3 months of deferred rent.
Yeah.
So 2 years and 9 months instead of three
Good.
months
Yeah.
is good. It just wasn't what I wanted it to be.
it's certainly given me a new look at having a business in a shopping centre then, because our massive shopping centres, when you're a tenant there, that's right, you're very disposable, aren't you? Because other people
Yeah.
do want to be there, and you're not negotiable, with any of those big corporate brands. So it's
Yeah,
certainly
absolutely.
enlightening. I'm assuming for many of my listeners too, if you actually just have, a property that's owned by, a local business person who rents it out, certainly the opportunity to negotiate would be much higher, particularly in these uncertain times.
Hmm.
Let's look at gender then. How does, because you're in a very cutthroat, probably I'm assuming male dominated area of
Hmm.
specialty, how do you find that being a woman? Is it an issue these days?
So it's really one of the things that I love about being a negotiator is that a lot of research has been done that shows that in general, women, and again, this is a generality, women tend to be better negotiators than men.
Hmm.
Now, the thing is that women, we don't give ourselves permission to negotiate. So
Mm.
I was talking with a venture capitalist recently, and he was expressing to me his frustration about women who come in with these great business ideas, but they're not asking for enough money.
Mm.
Whereas a guy comes in and he asks for a lot more than what he needs and he'll get it. But a woman will come in and not even ask for what she needs, which means that the business isn't even going to succeed because she's not getting what she needs.
Mm.
So, I think so. There are a few things that, so as a woman, that I think that I do that I really try to lean into and really kind of rely on. So, one, I do my hair this way on purpose. So, right, because I work all over the world, right, and there are a lot of cultures where a woman as a negotiator is not an acceptable thing.
Mm.
So I figure, and I've been doing my hair like this for 20 years, and I
For
figure
those
that that
for those just listening, we have a beautiful mop of pink hair displayed.
yes, it's pink and
And
blue
purple.
and purple and orange is in there too.
There you go.
And I've been doing this, like I've been doing this for a long time, and it's just become part of my brand. But one of the reasons why I do it is because it throws everybody off everywhere.
Mm.
And it's one of those things that people are just not it 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 disrupts their pattern about what I should be like.
Mm.
And and so and I need that, especially when I'm negotiating internationally in very male centric environments where women, not only are they male centric environments, but women are sometimes not well respected in those environments, in a business environment, in a business setting. So my hair is kind of a little piece of armor that I use to pattern disrupt and kind of go, okay, so I'm just going to throw you off a little bit, make you a little unsure about who I am and what I'm about.
Mm.
And that has worked really well for me. Now, certainly there are people who hate it, but that's fine. That's okay, because that it tells me, and it also gives me pieces of information about who that person is and kind of how they react. Because there's some people who are like, oh my god, I love your hair, and then there's people who are like, your hair looks like an ice cream cone. I mean, it's like right, it's like, so, but it usually gets some kind of reaction,
Absolutely.
and that's a piece of data, that's a data point that helps me figure out who that person, more
Yeah.
about who that person is. Versus if I just was, kind of normal and did, did my hair my normal color, then I wouldn't have that necessarily in the way that I get to use it. But I think the other thing is that women are really good at is we're really good at listening with intent.
Mm.
We can be, and this is, and it, again, not universal, but women often are considered stronger listeners,
Mm.
and men are considered stronger action takers. And so, and I was listening to a professor out of Copenhagen just recently, and he was talking about not making a delineation between male and female, but making a delineation between high testosterone and high estrogen, because men can have high estrogen, women can have high testosterone, and that and but the similarities are more similar are more prevalent when you're looking at it from that perspective. And I think that as women or high estrogen, we also tend to create empathy more quickly,
Mm.
and that willingness to create empathy makes it easier for us to see solutions that men may not always see, because they're just focused on getting something done and the task at hand versus the relationship component and kind of figuring that part out.
Mm.
I also think, and I don't have any evidence that says that, but one of the things that I use is how I ask questions. So I don't use why as a question.
Mm.
Why as a question immediately creates defensiveness
Mm.
on the person being asked it. And listeners, you can try this at home. If you go home and ask somebody in your household or ask a coworker why this, why not that, why did you do this, it automatically creates this kind of, what do they think, that there's a better way, did I do it wrong? I mean, that just creates this defensiveness.
Yeah.
So what and how questions are much more valuable in terms of getting to a good negotiation, because those are pieces of, they give you more information and without the defensiveness.
Mm.
I also feel that no is an invitation to ask more questions, because no is a reaction to a request, but I don't know what the rationale is for that reaction. So no just means I need to ask questions in a different way. So
Mm.
those are some of the things that I use that I don't see very many people use, that have proven very effective for me.
Mm. I think they're brilliant tips, and I'm assuming all of my listeners are thinking through, yeah, that's true. That's true. As soon as you're asked why, you suddenly go, well, and then you get all emotional because we've always got passionate, your why triggers your passion, doesn't it?
Yep.
Either your passion, and the things you've put your heart and soul and time and energy and everything into, or it's a critique of, because it's my job, because I've been doing it, and instantly you feel like, that criticism is,
Hmm.
for many, very
Yep.
difficult. Whereas that's right, if it's just, well, this is the way I've approached it, it does depersonalize a lot, which is what you've been sharing. It's, you're still
Hmm.
personal and engaged, but it's depersonalized. I think that is a brilliant piece of advice.
Yeah.
Who wouldn't you negotiate for?
Who would I not negotiate for?
Mm.
So I won't negotiate for somebody whose value system is inconsistent with mine.
Yeah.
So I have walked away from business when I have somebody. So we have a quiz that we created and we've taken in, so we've broken down negotiation styles into different categories. And there's a style called a champion, and a champion is really a champion for him or herself. It is all about annihilating their opponent. I always say they go to the negotiation, they see it as a battle, and they
Mm.
go armored and armed, and they are just like, and they're unreasonable. For me, clients that are champions can be very difficult for me to work with, because they'll be, it's like I actually just walked away from some business this week because, well, last week, because the the person was this champion type, and he wanted to renegotiate his rent. That's fine, but he's doing better than he was last year pre-COVID. And
Mm.
I'm like, that's just not cool. That's just not cool. And it's just, he just doesn't like his landlord, so he just wants to go get him. And I'm like, I'm not. I won't do that. I'm sure there are people who will go take that business, and
Sure.
they will do that. But that is just not. That is not how I operate. And for me, negotiation is about fairness, not about equality.
Mm.
And it's about integrity. And so that's a, yeah, that mentality. So I will not work with somebody who has that mentality of, I just want to go and get the guy or get the person and just
Yeah.
kind of room, if you pardon my expression. But that I
No,
just
but that's
I
exactly
just
it.
can't do that.
It's
I can't.
vindictive. It's saying,
Yeah,
here's an opportunity,
yeah,
I can take them, and that's it. It's for them, it's about the sport or a sense of entitlement
yeah,
or revenge. It's all those horrible qualities that can
yeah.
come out in someone. Whereas what you're actually showing to us in this podcast is that you're negotiating for what is right, what they're entitled
Mhm,
to actually in that situation, which is reasonable and fair
mhm.
considering. So sometimes that's right. Most of the time, it's not equal. You don't all go equal, but maybe
Right.
the entitlement isn't equal. It's there's a bit of a win lose win for whatever
Mhm,
reason. And so you're actually championing on their behalf to actually
mhm,
get what they deserve or entitled to in that situation,
mhm.
as opposed to, yeah, let's just get as much as we can so that they suffer. It's not about that.
Right.
I think a lot of people have a poor view, which might be like that man at the beginning that you were sharing. It's like, this is
Yes.
going to be brutal. This is horrible. I don't like the feelings. I don't like being that person. This might
Yes.
be why many women, as you know, and I'll find that in my coaching, I often have to go, but what do you actually want? And they don't want to put out what they want. They'll actually ask what they think they'll receive, which is very
Mhm.
different. And I go,
Yes.
but why wouldn't you ask what you want? Go, because I might not get it, or then I'll fail, or this or that. They don't see it as, well, you might as well ask for exactly what you want because that's there for a reason. And
Mhm.
then we negotiate back if and as required. It's
Right.
putting your best foot forward as
Mhm.
opposed to just what you think, because you'll always be limited. And also, it's not right and it's not fair, not just to you personally, but it's not fair that someone else would then capitalize on that, to be honest, that
Oh, absolutely.
you're actually getting ripped off because you're not being as bold as they are. And that's not
Exactly.
right. Yeah.
In California, where I live, they passed a law last year for jobs where an employer can no longer ask what your previous job salary was,
Oh,
which I'm like, I love that because it takes that that false benchmark away,
yeah.
right? That benchmark that women and minorities have been paid significantly less than white men in the United States and throughout the world. And it eliminates the ability to use that as a benchmark. Now in California, it's like women need to understand, need to figure out what their worth is and what their value is, because now they actually can, they can literally
Yeah, you can do a
ask for
massive
what they
jump.
want.
You can.
Yeah,
You can actually go,
yeah,
yeah, I believe I'm appropriate for this role. I'm putting my hat forward,
exactly,
and therefore this is what
exactly,
the role is worth. It doesn't matter what you've done before. Because some people, that's
exactly.
it in their career, they will have big jumps. You
Yep,
don't always have to have little jumps, or you don't have to be limited because of where you were previously. And it's someone else's view on the incremental appropriateness,
yes,
which is only appropriate for them. It should not. I agree. That's a brilliant rule. I love
yeah.
that.
Yeah, I mean, I love it. I mean, my husband's a great example, not obviously from the female perspective, but he just got a new job during COVID, and he had been unemployed for 10 years ago. He took a job with his dream company, but he took like a $60,000 pay cut because he'd been unemployed for a while, and the market wasn't good, and so he just took a pay cut that he never recovered from.
Yeah.
And so he was like, I want to make this certain amount of money. He's like, but it's such a big increase. I don't think anyone's going to give it to me. And I
Mm,
said, as long as you believe that nobody is going to give it to you, nobody is going to give it to you.
exactly.
As soon as you change your mindset on that, as soon as you, like I said, the hardest negotiation is the negotiation between our ears. As soon as you change your mindset, that will change. And he did. And he got a 25% salary increase out of in during COVID, right? So and better benefits, more vacation. I mean, it's just more of everything. And so it's one of the things that people when I speak about negotiation, I tell people that there are kind of three big things that you need to have in a good negotiation. The first one is knowing what you want, which people think that sounds simple, right?
Yeah,
It
no,
sounds simple,
it
but
does
it's
sound simple,
not.
but people don't know what they want.
They don't, and they focus on just these high level things And when you only focus on the high level things without thinking about, as my grandmother used to say, the gnat's ass level detail, the little bug detail, right? Is when you think about that, the reason why that's important is because the stuff that's at the bottom of your list, once you know what's on the list, you then prioritize it to say, how important are these things and what's kind of my rank order of them, so that I know that if I give only unimportant things away
Yeah.
in exchange for my important things. Because what happens when we don't have that level of that clarity on what we want, we give things away that actually end up being really important to us.
Mm.
And we walk away unsatisfied with the negotiation because we gave something up that we shouldn't have.
Mm.
And so having that clarity around what you want and why it's important to you is really critical,
Mm.
really critical.
Mm. That's a brilliant point. That's right. Yeah, and you often don't know, unfortunately, what you value if you don't do this seriously until it's lost. And then you've given away. That's right. Something
Right.
that is then, very difficult to reclaim.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, what do you see as a successful woman, Christine? You are a successful woman. What does that mean to you?
For me, it means having the ability to impact others. So for me, I part of what I do is I shared a little bit of my story with you, but I haven't shared it really with the audience. I was an unwed teen mom. I was homeless. I lived in the back of my 1972 Chrysler Newport when I was pregnant with my oldest daughter. I was on public assistance for many, many years and shopped at a food bank for groceries and boiled water on the stove to give my kids baths. And so I love being able to do all this so that I can help other single moms
Mm.
and help girls get an education, because education is what saved me from a life of poverty and saved my daughters from having to live in poverty. And so I volunteer for an organization here in Los Angeles that works with inner city girls. We work with girls from the age of from seventh grade through their first degree in college, and we have this huge mentorship program. And I love that. It's amazing. Most of them are first generation college students, and
Wow.
it's just amazing to see them and their families on graduation day. It's just such a rewarding thing. And then I also volunteer for an organization called She Is Hope Los Angeles, which is really about trying to figure out ways to circumvent public assistance programs. And our goal is to raise enough money to buy an apartment complex to house single moms and their kids who are in our program, which we have an education program where we help moms do everything, figure out how to manage their finances, how to build credit, how to write a resume, how to do job interviews, how to negotiate, so we have this broad program that we do. And so for me, being successful is about being able to make an impact and being able to give back,
Mm.
because you know I like a Maserati. I think they're great cars, and my Koenigsegg, I want one. I want to buy my husband a great boat, but that does not get me out of bed in the morning.
Mm.
Knowing that somebody is getting off the system and getting out of a domestic violence situation, and that person is being set up for success and being part of the organizations that are setting them up for success.
Mm.
That's the part that matters to me.
Mm.
That's so for me, that's what being successful is all about.
Mm. So listen in, particularly those in my magic tribe. Here's a classic example of what drives behavior. Absolutely. What drives that inner drive is, yeah, as Christine just shared, you've just gone and said, your whole beginnings is not, no one would have expected Christine McKay to be this, top chief negotiator with all of this ability, recognition, you've got books, you've got programs, people in high demand, this lady with the pink and purple and orange hair, when you actually look at your beginnings. But it didn't define you. It actually showed you all of the stepping stones. And many people I work with, which is why I've just honed in on this point, see, people in these successful positions and go, well, I couldn't be them. The reality is everyone can be. It's stepping stones, it's believing in yourself, it's asking for what you want rather than what you think you'll get. And to be, appreciative of those people, like you, Christine, who give back and to help them. So accept the help if you're in that situation, because some people find it hard to accept the help.
It is hard.
And those
It
other
is hard.
people, who are actually, in those other situations, give back. And like many people on this program, that desire to give back because of the roots of their core, what they valued and what they wanted and what they desired is so strong. And I think that is such a wonderful thing that you're doing to be able to help people on their way. And you're a beautiful human being.
Thank you. Thank you.
So
Well, I feel that way about you too. You're pretty awesome. And I'm very glad Dawn Bates introduced us.
So those of you who are listening, Dawn was the author of my biography that I had recently. And that's another example of, just putting yourself out into a whole new area. So like Christine's a negotiator. I've now gone and launched myself into other areas of saying, I'm going to be a global podcaster. And people would go, well, that's not really possible. It's like, you watch, I'll just start befriending people in my sort of space, the people that I admire, that are people I value, and they'll be all around the world. And here we are. I think we're up to episode 29 or something now. And
Awesome.
it's
So
actually,
exciting.
it's beautiful, and it's through people who are in your current present space. It's not people, as we were mentioning before, from the past. It's not way things were. It actually says, well, who are you today, and who is going to add value to your future, and how are you going to add value to theirs and those that they impact. And that's where I've just been delighted to share in this whole global network of women who are just doing their thing. And they're doing it with incredible capability, there's no doubt, but a gratitude every day of the situations that they're in, appreciation of what they have, and incredible capacity to then go, okay, while I keep achieving, which is the ultimate, normal way of seeing success, what else can I give back? And I just so admire that. So I thank you for sharing that with the women that you do.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Memoirs of Successful Women. You can find me at anniegibbins.com, where you can download my free resources, get connected on social, and check out my online magic transformation program. If you love this show, feel free to subscribe to future episodes, and of course, share it with your friends. I'll see you again soon, and until then, happy podcasting.